Hello learners and welcome to U.S. History, Reconstruction to Present. We're on week 18 and this week's assignments are units 4.5, 5.5, and 5.6 and any extra time that you have, I would love for you to get caught up on any assignments that you might be behind on or need to resubmit for a higher grade since we don't have too many assignments this week. Okay, so the big concepts this week, World War II in the Pacific. We're going to talk about the Japanese internment camps and the atomic bombs to end the war. And I found this video on a Japanese internment camp. It was actually filmed in 1943, so it's kind of a flashback. It was recorded and it was kind of shown to people to explain exactly why, we were doing the Japanese internment camps. Okay, so hopefully you will enjoy watching this and learning from it as much as I did.
This picture tells how the mass migration was accomplished. Neither the Army nor the War Relocation Authority relished the idea of taking men, women, and children from their homes, their shops, and their farms. So the military and civilian agencies alike determined to do the job as a democracy should, with real consideration for the people involved. There were more Japanese in Los Angeles than in any other area. At nearby San Pedro, houses and hotels occupied almost exclusively by Japanese were within a stone's throw of a naval air base, shipyards, oil wells. Japanese fishermen had every opportunity to watch the movement of our ships. Japanese farmers were living close to vital aircraft plants. So as a first step, all Japanese were required to move from critical areas such as these. Notices were posted. All persons of Japanese descent were required to register. They gathered in their own churches and schools, and the Japanese themselves cheerfully handled the enormous paperwork involved in the migration. Now the actual migration got underway. The Army provided fleets of vans to transport household belongings and buses to move the people to assembly centers. The evacuees cooperated wholeheartedly. The many loyal among them felt that this was a sacrifice they could make in behalf of America's war effort. In small towns as well as large, up and down the coast, the moving continued. Behind them, they left shops and homes they had occupied for many years. Fishing fleets were impounded and left under guard. Now they were taken to racetracks and fairgrounds where the Army almost overnight had built assembly centers. They lived here until new pioneer communities could be completed on federally owned lands in the interior. Santa Anita Racetrack, for example, suddenly became a community of about 17,000 persons. The Army provided housing and plenty of healthful, nourishing food for all. The residents of the new community set about developing a way of life as nearly normal as possible. They held church services, Protestant, Catholic, and Buddhist. They issued their own newspaper, organized nursery schools, and some made camouflage nets for the United States Army. Meanwhile, in Arizona, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and elsewhere, quarters were being built where they would have an opportunity to work and more space in which to live. When word came that these new homes were ready, the final movement began. Relocation center, evacuees were met by an advance contingent of Japanese who had arrived some days earlier and who now acted as guides. Naturally, the Newcomers looked about with some curiosity. They were in a new area, on land that was raw, untamed, but full of opportunity. Here they would build schools, educate their children, reclaim the desert. Their own physicians took precautions to guard against epidemics. They opened advanced Americanization classes for college students, who in turn would instruct other groups. They made a rough beginning at self-government, for while the Army would guard the outer limits of each area, community life and security within were largely up to the Japanese themselves. They immediately saw the need for developing civic leaders. At weekly community meetings, citations were given to the block leaders who had worked most diligently. Special emphasis was put on the health and care of these American children of Japanese descent. Most of whom are American citizens, and their grandparents, who are aliens, immediately wanted to go to work. Now, this brief picture is actually the prologue to a story that is yet to be told. It will be fully told only when circumstances permit the loyal American citizens once again to enjoy the freedom we in this country cherish, and when the disloyal, we hope, have left this country for good. In the meantime, we are setting a standard for the rest of the world in the treatment of people who may have loyalties to an enemy nation. We are protecting ourselves without violating the principles of Christian decency. And we won't change this fundamental decency no matter what our enemies do. But of course, we hope most earnestly that our example will influence the Axis powers in their treatment of Americans who fall into their hands.
So hopefully this gives you some idea of the internment camps. The sad thing was, while, people were taken to these camps, some of the, the houses and businesses and different things did get raided. I mean, there definitely were, there were issues. This was not a perfect system. And then many years later, Reagan did admit fault and gave each person that was sent to an internment camp $20,000 to try to make up for past wrongs. Now, obviously, that in no way made up for it, but it was just a showing that, we realized we messed up, and, people suffered for many years, because after the internment camps, the Japanese were released, people were not willing, to give out jobs to the Japanese Americans and different things like that. So there was a lot of suffering for quite some time. Okay, so just make sure you're doing your Google Classroom and you're watching the video, answering the questions, and there's, again, a breakdown. Okay, so if you have any questions, reach out to me. Use this week to get caught up, work ahead, resubmit assignments, and have a wonderful winter break. Thanks. Bye.